Hi, welcome to One Word a Day. I'm Sophie, your pilot into the universe of Chinese. We are going to continue our journey in learning just a little bit more of this amazing language every day. And yesterday we talked about 集装箱, which is the Chinese adaptation to contemporary living, because 集装箱, talking about ocean container. It's a new thing. It's a 21st century thing. And all three characters, 集装箱, came from previous concepts that way before the time of ocean container. So I guess English adapt too, because there was no ocean container, and container could mean anything. And when we pair ocean and a container together, it means exactly the 20-footers or 40-footer containers that eventually will be loaded onto 18-wheelers, right? To travel or transport goodies around the world. So it's a globalization age symbol almost. So that's 集装箱. Today we talk about the same 集, but is in a totally different context. 集中力量办大事. Okay, just hear it again. 集中力量办大事. Okay, faster, normal Chinese speaking speed. 集中力量办大事. Okay, now this is a slogan. Everybody who speaks Chinese, who tune into Chinese media would come across. This is the theme song, if so to speak, of the last 3 years during COVID time, especially. The essence of this message is if you can gather and you can center all your powers, all your resources, centralize them, and then you can have some big deal, like you can make some big projects happen. In a way, it's probably true, but in a lot of other ways, it's not true. Things are conditional, things are in relativity, right? But this was held as almost like a universal truth. And when it's applied in, say, zero COVID, in this 集中力量办大事, try to apply to, fighting a virus, apparently it doesn't work. And things just were falling out in China regarding COVID-19 policy. So this used to be lauded as the merit of centralize the government, everything so centralized that you can make something big happen. A lot of times it is true, right? Many other times it's not. So now let's unpack how it works. 集, we have the 3 birds sitting on top of a tree. So 3 doesn't mean exact 3. 3 is Chinese way of saying many. It's more than 2. So a lot of trees, a cloud of, not trees, a lot of birds, a cloud of birds sitting on top of a tree. So that's the image of 集, and essentially that means gather. So when birds are flying, they fly together and they gather on top of a tree together as well. So it's a kind of a clan or cloud of birds sitting together. So that's the kind of a symbol. Birds of a feather gather together, right? So birds often it's the same kind of bird, and it's assembly of that bird. So this bird gathered together, essentially from that extended into just gathering. Gathering most likely could be people or other resources of similar kind gather together. And China call themselves 中国, the center country, because, well, it's a self-centered viewpoint of China would regard themselves as the center of the world, right? A self-centered view. I mean, we all started from the self-centered view. We want to stay in the center. We definitely, okay, when we were born into the world, we will view ourselves at the center of the world, right? So as a country over there, also describe themselves as the center of the world. Everything else, all the other geographical, resources or people, culture, they are surrounding us. It could be. from that perspective. So this 中 simply comes from this box cut right through in the middle by this vertical line. And that's a very visual way to mean something cut exactly in the middle. So that it essentially means, I mean, extended into center, and center doesn't have to mean on a two-dimensional space, cut in the middle. It could mean in a three-dimensional space. It's right in the middle in all dimensions, all three dimensions, it's right in the middle. So not only horizontally, vertically in the middle, and in depth in the middle as well. So it could be the exact heart of things, the center of things. Okay, 集中 together is a verb that means gather. So 中 is simply the result of the gather. So you want to gather scattered resources, kind of orient everything, gather them together into a tightly bundled, centered location. And 力量 is another pairing. 力 come from this farming tool. It looks like a rake, right? So this is kind of the neck of the tool, and then the three spikes are just like the raking mechanical structure of the rake. And that farming tool eventually symbolized power, because for agrarian society, farming is everything. It's the one dominant economy over there in the past. So that symbolized power, muscle power, or productivity, right? And 量 came from this measuring of something. It looks almost like a scale, right? A scale sitting on top of something, and then have an object measuring in the middle of it. And there is almost looking like a sun sitting as the background from that. I don't want to go further into it, but the whole thing in contemporary Chinese, it means unit of measurement. It means basically measuring. And when you measure, somebody have to set a standard, like what's the unit of measurement, right? And eventually things can be quantified based on this unit of measurement. So this 力量 was this measuring process. You can see visually it is measuring something, and eventually it extended into this unit of measure, and further extended into this quantification process, and paired with 力 量. So when it get quantified, this muscle power get quantified, now almost like even further legitimize the power. That's 力量 together, make it even more official to mean it's sort of some power, either it's military power, or production power, manpower somehow. So that's 力量, 集中力量. Now you can see it's centralized manpower or other resources. And then the result, the promise of that behavior of centralizing your resources, the result of that is 办大事. Okay, I translate it as cut big deal. It's funny because in contemporary Chinese, this 办, you see, almost look like the 力 character with only two extra slanted dots or short strokes on each side. And we can see it as if it's cutting. Almost look at it as a knife and cut it. But the knife image doesn't have this stroke going over it. It stays inside. That's a knife. But when it pokes through, it came from this character. So that's the distinction in contemporary Chinese. So I kind of intentionally mistranslated as cut big deal, because that's the English expression. And from it, you can almost mistake it as using a knife if without this extra poking stroke over here. It could be a knife image with something cut into half. So that was cut, but you can see the original Chinese It's very complicated. With this farming tool, you see, same farming tool, now squished in the middle, very narrow, but the essential structures are there. You cannot elaborate like this neck go this way and that way. You cannot be so elaborate, no details. Things are streamlined and simplified over there. So, but it's the farming tool, right? And the left and right, symmetrical. They are the ancient corporal punishment in jail to prisoners. Some kind of a pokey, spiky thing going to be administered to inflict pain on whoever committed whatever crime. So this thing becomes then the symbol of punishment and then the symbol of authority, like the consequence of not obeying or of breaking the law is to facing this tool, this pain. And so you have the farming tool with two human punishing tool on the side. That actually means the main function of the governmency back then is like with this punishing tool and sort of, I guess, encouraging, like punishing means threatening, right? To force people to obey because they fear the pain. And then in the middle, the farming tool means encouraging production. So probably the function of the local government is to 2 doses of punishing plus 1 dose of economic and encouraging the economy growing. So economy is 1 part, 2 part is governing, punishing of law enforcement. So 2 portions of political governance, 1 portion of economic governance, probably we can be that. So that's the ancient one. And in contemporary, this 2 corporal punishment tool was simplified into this 2 dot. And we still have this farming tool in the middle. So that's the origin of that. And simply this means running government, right? So it's governing, basically. Govern, big. So this is human figure with horizontal line. That's our big. And then deal came from the 3-hand finger that symbolize doing, right? And then this oval hat, an up-tilted headgear means, and also this long stroke means somebody who is in the position. Government officials wear a special looking headgear to distinguish them from non-government, from the governed. So the governor will have a different headgear from the governed, from the people, the commoners. So this means it's a government official thing. And then with this hand, that means this need to be the executive arms of that governmency. So it's a government official with the power, with the right to do something, with this 3-finger hand holding this authority, I guess, for them to do things. So that eventually become doing things, 是 generalized into things, but it came from this governing as well. So both are governing, and then big deal. So I translate and cut big deal for you to easy understand, but there are more stories behind the letters, the characters. So 集中力量办大事, if I want to translate into English, it's probably in some economic, political concepts. There are similar concepts, but on top of my head, I couldn't think of that. So I just translated it as the power of centralization. So that's the merit. I call it the CCP Mantra in 2020. So when COVID just started to hit, the rest of the world got impacted heavily, and that spikes of COVID cases, death cases, all that tough time, turbulent times happening to the rest of the world. But in a contrast, the China zero COVID policy back then installed because there was no what's it called? immunization yet. There's no shot to prevent the spread of the virus. So the policy back then was zero COVID, and up till like 3 years long, zero COVID. And the idea is the central government can just install such a nationwide policy and execute it to the lowest level, the city, county, or I don't know, however lower level, or your community, your gated community, or your residential building, to the very end of every fiber and cell of the society. And the decision was made, there was no flexibility, and everybody follow the same thing. And the idea of why people follow, because of this thinking of power of centralization. If we behave the same way, if we orient ourselves toward the same central idea of, in the case of COVID, fighting is to stay at home, to have lockdown. I mean, government install it, so you have no other way. You just follow the same way. Either it's lockdown or whatever. Localized. There could be some localized, but overall, it's nationwide, same policy, same method, same approach, and that's regarded as the benefit, because we can do that nationwide. So therefore, virus was kind of locked down and isolated. So therefore, virus was contained within the infected, and the rest of the population still okay. So that's the thinking back then. And the 集中力量办大事 is the main argument or the main proposition of the benefit of being centralized. Like if you have just one voice, one policy, one way of doing things, you can centralize all your resources and accomplish some big deal. And I just search 集中力量办大事 on the internet and then come up random examples of how this was visualized, how it was presented to be the main argument of CCP, why they have this one policy cover all, like a one size fit all kind of policy administered. The logic, the reason was like that. And the exact way here it says 集中力量办大事, the least examples of this power of centralization. Basically, you can see this big architectures. So architectures, or any ancient architecture accomplishment, symbolize the centralized resources, that, or pyramid, something like that, right? Some beyond one single human being capacities, or multiple generations of efforts, all pulled into building one big architecture. And this is this big thing, this 大事, because architecture is visually representing that centralized power, centralized resources, that you can really build some monumental architecture, long-standing on planet Earth, right? So that's the example used. And then here we're talking about the 坚持, which is upheld or uphold, maintain this 集中力量办大事, and then they're talking about the 制度优势. So that's their systematic advantage. So because communists, they have to propose their argument of distinguish themselves from capitalism. So communism, the China flavored communism, this system would have this advantage because they have this power of centralization. I mean, could be, right? That's the here is saying, like, we need to maintain this systematic advantage because we can have centralized everything. And here is just a human figure, put a face on it, so representing all kinds of professions, and everybody is surrounding on this mantra. So in whatever walks of life you are, you realize, and you're benefiting from 集中力量办大事. And like all together, we are building the country because we can achieve grand goals because we have the centralized power. 集中力量办大事. Okay, that's it. This is contemporary Chinese. Is the slogan, the mantra of CCP been a while, but highly sung. This is the song sing in the past 3 years during COVID-19. Okay. 集中力量办大事, cash into the concept of thinking by one word a day with Sophie. See you another day.